Hello again and welcome. A new video, I guess. Um, feel like I want to actually continue on something where I left off, where this vision I was describing with like a system, or I want to now call it a system organized in unity, where all the participants are living their own essence, moving from that, participating from that. It's interesting to notice myself also how that train of thought stopped. Still figuring out the format of all this, but feels maybe it's a good thing to like make a new video about this kind of a topic. So call it a system in unity, something like that. Reflecting a bit on, well, what is our current system, I would say there is a lot of selfish energy, individualistic, and again connect this with the vision of a human body. Imagine in a human body that the individual selves, they have this attitude of I want my resources, give it to me, feed me, and like sharing, maybe locally a bit, but not too much. I feel this is in some way an accurate description of the current system, often feeling a lot of the economical or financial pressure which drives us into that sort of a scarcity mindset and behavior, which can certainly also show up in a human physical body. But then when you keep living like this, well, what happens is you get sick, and eventually the body, or at least let's think about this a bit more, you may have areas that are not getting what they actually need, whereas other areas may be hoarding everything, hoarding the resources, maybe growing a really fat belly or something, hoarding all that extra energy, whereas other parts are actually lacking the energy. Whereas the image of a healthy body, also really try to embody that, be an example of that. But let's ask a question: what is a healthy body? Well, first thing I'm thinking about is the energy is circulating, it is moving, it is not stagnant, flexible, it has strength, it is powerful as well, strong, resilient. But what shapes such a body? It's interesting because the thought that just came is how our own body often also reflects our way of life, which also includes our behavior and how we are actually energetically, consciously participating in the world. An image that comes to mind actually here is like the typical portraying of like a very greedy banker, which would be very fat and always eating, consuming, whereas then the workers are very thin and almost starving. But again, thinking about a body where there is a flow, also the flow is in balance, no leakages. and now trying to connect that again with the systems or our bigger human systems. Earlier already the image came up of, well, when we look at, for example, different areas within the worldly body, different continents. We certainly have continents that are much more well fed, much more having resources, or at least having that kind of abundance, uh, which is also interesting because I would say often resources are actually coming from the places where the people are actually very poor or kept poor. So questioning how is this state, how did we, how and why are we living this? And then how do we get to a unity type of situation? What does the balance actually look like? The I would say in general, trying to describe this, the overconsumption has to be dialed down, whereas the underconsumption or like the starvation at areas can be then this which is dialed down can then be transferred there, which is interesting because it makes me think about, in some way, I guess our system already tries to create something like that through financial aid or other remedies, trying to, but I feel to truly solve this, we have to go looking deeper structurally. Maybe also at the consciousness of the participants. It already appeared a bit in my mind, but it's maybe interesting to reflect on the one who is playing that role of taker, maybe thief or stealing or robbing, or like the abuser or um, the exploiter, and how it goes together with the one who is actually giving or like letting it be taken from them. Those kind of power dynamics, that can also be a very interesting reflection, because a solution to this state is not coming from just one side. It's like both participants, they are in a dynamic together, and both of them have to make a change, a complementary change. It's interesting to think about how this naturally, I would say, moves or comes up anyways. Consciousness, call it maybe consciousness evolution or something. It's interesting to then maybe try to differentiate between, we can actually become more conscious in changing our behavior, or we can let the unconscious run free, and then that which has been bottling up so much is gonna explode, often also leading to maybe more drastic consequences. Let's maybe create an example where someone has been brought to really almost starvation. That person might bottle up their rage or something like that, and eventually try to take their power back, but do it in a very violent way. That is one way in which these cycles can, or these dynamics can move, but trying to point that there is also a different path where we can actually just become more conscious participants, and then It's interesting because this example I just gave, it often also just switches the dynamic. Suddenly it's like the one who has been stealing or exploiting is now the one who becomes exploited. The power just switches from polarity. And that's not really a solution because the same behavior is still there. Whereas you can also change that system itself through becoming more conscious, becoming more aware of what are we actually doing and why, and then make that conscious change in this. I think that is maybe of the essence a lot within unity consciousness is realizing that we are all one. That this other participant in which I am in a dynamic in is, even though I am also my individual self, we together are still part of a bigger unity. So feel there is a really important change or a significant change that can be made in realizing this. To change our perception and perspectives towards that unity, ask the question of, well, or the question that arises is, what does the bigger one actually want? Maybe from the both of us? Or can we find a solution in which both of us are actually benefiting? Again, this maybe call it a bit extreme example for right now. A body that is in total unity. I would actually like to maybe apply that example into a physical body. Like all the cells in complete coherence and unity working together. I then ask the question, would we even age? What is getting sick when you are in that state? What is maybe even feeling tired? Not that you don't need or want rest, but it opens up a whole new flow of energy within the body, allowing us to live in a very different way, which certainly feels, comparing that state to a unhealthy physical body, you're just able to do much more. You're able to also, the quality of your life is very different. It asks, or it raises the question within me, why would we not want that? But I also have an understanding of perception is the answer to that. How do we see this? You have to be able to see it, or to be able to want it, to see that this is actually possible. Maybe also interesting, a lot of people in their consciousness seem to have the belief that unity is impossible, full cooperation is impossible, or maybe that it is not. It's interesting maybe also to approach this from a more analytical approach, game theory type of, like, if I assume that the other people aren't gonna come in unity, then their own best strategy would be to assume that, well, we are not reaching that state of total unity. So I'm just gonna do what is best for me as an individual. But the thing is, if we all keep doing this, well, yeah, then we don't get the unity. But this unity is still possible. We just all have to choose it. We have to choose to unite. We have to choose to truly learn to work together as a body in order to achieve that. Because I'm not trying to say that we necessarily have to, in that same trying to force it onto people, like you must now do this. It's interesting to think about that, how some human systems, I would say, have tried to force people into, thinking about coercion, that is different than cohesion. You're forcing them to work together, and that it is either way, it doesn't work to get you into that, even though you may actually achieve a better solution than the total individualistic one, total selfish one. You will never reach the total unity using that pathway either. I think a very essential part of this unity is freedom, and also to allow the freedom. So this brings me to, has to come from oneself as an individual within this whole, as a participant within this whole. As I'm feeling this, maybe thinking about the things I'm saying here, it feels like a whole job, a whole task, maybe even impossible. Which I'm also feeling like it is certainly possible. But I'm within that energy, I'm also feeling how, well, it will take something to, or like to grow into that. The participants, the individuals, have to undergo a transformation. So it will take something for us to be willing to undergo such a transformation. And that's where I then tie this in with, what are we actually observing in our current world, current situation. I think it's quite accurate, or having a grounded reflection on this, that our systems are really showing signs that they are not really sustainable, maybe even heading towards collapse in many different shapes and ways and degrees. And so connecting this, seeing the opportunity in all of these changes. I was also thinking earlier about the dependency on our current system. I feel a lot of people are currently very dependent on that system, especially financially, economically. That is often a big driver within the human system, I would say, and the whole thing of this world seems to be that all about money, or which makes it move around, which isn't necessarily fully the truth, but when the systems themselves change or become less providing in that security which makes people dependent on them, this can all create or provides us actually with surely difficulty. But that difficulty, within that there is a lot of opportunity that we actually now are able or more willing, which to me often go together. Where will there is a way. um, Sometimes the will just has to be strong enough to be willing to change our lives, to be willing to become more self-sufficient, to be willing to depend less on our current system. Maybe because our environment is almost forcing us to do so. Not necessarily the human systems, but it can also be nature itself. And there is beauty in that. Or at least when we see, well, there is certainly the beauty is there, but we have to be able to see it. And the fun thing is that when we see the beauty in all of this, then it becomes light. We may actually be willing or more willing to move with it, to let these transformations happen. Feel like I will leave it again here, um, as this train of thought seemed to have stopped again, and then we'll see. Have a good one.